Hey everybody, this is Dave Stelzel, author of The House in the Cloud, and today I'm going to share with you 3 questions that will completely transform your sales calls going forward. Now, before we get into 3 questions, I want to remind you in the last video that I put out there, I talked about how to sell a security assessment, and I mentioned in there something really important, and that is what the person buying the security assessment or doing the security assessment really wants. And that one thing summarized really is a measure of risk. And in that, I showed you a simple model called the impact likelihood graph. The impact likelihood graph is an XY axis, basically showing the data that's important in order of importance, and then a measure of likelihood. And in that video, I talked about the fact that the buyer, the person responsible for the data, knows what the impact is once you ask the right questions, but they don't understand what the likelihood is. And that is unique because very few risk assessments out there talk anything about what exposure is and how much exposure that person has. When you understand that, making the security sale is pretty simple. Now, if we look at a typical sales call where security is involved, what we see is a salesperson with some products or a solution offering or a managed security offering or whatever it is. And the first thing out of their mouth is going to be bad things that are happening out there. So I'm talking about things like news articles, like 67% of companies got hacked like this, and this is how much money it costs the company to get hacked, or this is what percentage of companies go out of business once they are hacked. And if that strategy worked, then people would be making tons of money selling security because there's news stories like that in the news every single day. The problem is, if you've tried that, you know, and I know, that the buyer is not going to pull their checkbook out because some other company got hacked yesterday. And there's a reason for that, which I'm not going to go into in detail in this video because that's not what this is about, but there's some brain science behind that that makes statistics not a good thing to use at this point in the sales call. But what is good to use are questions, and there are 3 questions you should be asking. This is how you get out of the commodity security sale and get into a consultative sale. Now, let's go back to the impact likelihood graph. As I mentioned, the impact likelihood graph is an XY axis that shows us the impact and the likelihood. And the thing that the buyer really wants to know is no different, as I mentioned in the last video on selling assessments, it's no different than when you walk into your doctor and you want to know what the likelihood is that something bad is going to happen to me. And so you have this physical, and they do a bunch of blood work and all sorts of stuff to figure out if things like cancer or diabetes or other deadly diseases are in your near future. And when I do a security risk assessment, that's the same thing I'm looking for. What's the likelihood that something really bad is going to happen to this person if they don't fix something? Now, before I just get into selling, what I want to do is I want to collect some information. And I'm going to ask 3 questions, and these questions are not leading questions. I'm not setting this person up. I'm simply gathering some information, and they are not what keeps you up at night. In fact, stop asking that question. So here's the question. The first question, question 1 that you should be asking is, what are you trying to protect? The person wants to buy a firewall. The person's looking at antivirus. They're not sure what they need. What you want to know is what needs to be protected here. Now, they might say everything, or they might not be sure, or you might be thinking the network, but none of those answers are true. The truth is they need to protect certain data, and some data is worth a fortune and some data is worth almost nothing. Some data would be really embarrassing if it were out there. Others would lead to a lawsuit. But your job right now is to understand what that person, not what you, but what that person believes are the high value data assets that sit on their systems or in their cloud. So the question is, what are you trying to protect? And that is really a framework. It's a question that should expand. I want to understand some things like how much downtime can you stand? How much data can you afford to lose? What happens if this data gets in the hands of those people? So it's not a simple question. It's a question that requires some diving in. Now, once I understand what do you want to protect, the second thing I want to ask is, well, what are the relevant threats? Now, I wouldn't ask it exactly like that. I'd be more asking something like, who do you think would want your data? Who out there might break in and get it? Are you afraid of ransomware? Do you think people inside might misuse your data or make some kind of operational error that would lead to exposing data out there? I'm looking for what that person is worried about when I start to talk about data security in terms of confidentiality, integrity, or availability. All 3 are important, but some of those are more important given certain data to that person. And they believe that some of those things are more likely than others. So what are the relevant threats? The third question I want to ask is a long question with a short answer, and it goes something like this. How comfortable are you if you were to get hacked today that you would know it and would be able to stop it in time before something bad happened? The key to this question is, how comfortable are you? And many times they might say, well, I don't know. I've had buyers look at their IT person and say, what do you think? And when they do that, I stop them and I say, no, I'm not interested in your technical person's perception. I want to know what you think. I want to know how comfortable you are right now with your company's ability to detect and stop something that might end up in a lawsuit or a business disabling thing in your world. And the typical answer is going to be, I don't know. Now, there's a number of places to take that conversation, but here's what you need to understand. We've got this impact likelihood graph. Impact versus likelihood. This is the heart of the risk equation. It's what tells us about exposure. But what I just asked were 3 questions that help me understand, what does the impact likelihood graph look like in the mind of my prospect? Question 1, what are you trying to protect? This question answers what should be on the x-axis over here. And question 2, what are the relevant threats? That's what pushes the likelihood up the impact likelihood graph. And question 3, how comfortable are you with your ability to detect and respond to an intrusion before it's too late and stop it? This tells me if they believe that they are really in trouble up here with high likelihood, high risk, or are they down here and they're going to be fine? In most cases, they don't know. Now, if the person tells me they've got it covered, then I know one of 2 things. Either they are ignorant and they have no idea how powerful hackers really are, or the kinds of mistakes that employees really make, or number 2, they're lying. Because the truth is, nobody out there should feel like they have it covered. Nobody does have it covered. We might be working on it. We might have an initiative in place, or we might just be worried, but nobody has it covered. So I've got 3 simple questions. I now know what the impact likelihood looks like in the mind of my customer, and now I know where to take the sale. Are they lying, which means I need to build trust, or are they ignorant, which means I need to educate? And by knowing one of those 2 things, it's going to give me a path to take to get them to the point where they need to assess their risk. They need to understand what the true impact likelihood graph looks like so that we can figure out where they really are and how to put that risk level down to an acceptable level. And when I have it there, then I can sell a managed security program to maintain likelihood as they move more and more into the digital age. Again, I'm Dave Stelzel, author of The House in the Cloud. I want to make sure you get my risk assessment template because this is the key to taking the education meeting into something that builds justification to drive through to the sale.